this opportunity to invite the President of the Association of Political Science, Dr. S.T. Christopher Chandran, to address the gathering.
Dear Dr. Parivelan and members of the political science family, good afternoon to one and all. It gives me great pleasure to have one of our own celebrated old boy of the department as the guest of honor. It's such a joy to have you in our midst, Pari. And as I used to call him those days, now he is Dr. Parivelan, as a distinguished professor in the prestigious Tata Institute of Social Sciences. We're so happy to have you, Pari, with us. And I'm so happy that you are here to enlighten us on an area that you have specialized. Our happiness doubles when we always have our own to deliver special lectures. On day one of the first session of the Indian Parliament recently, that is actually right now happening, till the 1st of October, specially held with regarding to coronavirus, the government told Parliament it does not have any data on migrants who died or were injured, and so no one was compensated. No such data is maintained, according to the Union Labour Minister Santosh. Images of tens and thousands of workers leaving various states after losing their jobs and homes in nationwide shutdown were compared by many to the tragic scenes of the mass exodus after the partition of 1947. With no money or food to feed their families, migrant laborers started on foot for their hometowns hundreds of kilometers away. Many died on brutal journey to their homes. It is sad that we always talk about estimated figures about laborers, but today it's high time there is a need to create such a database about migrant laborers so that they could get some welfare schemes of benefit. Their skill mapping has to be done. There's also a scheme called Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan for the unorganized workers, where states, governments also share some money to the center. Gujarat's new industrial policy launched last Saturday talks about dormitory housing for migrant laborers, and Tamil Nadu also seems to be following that. Supreme Court earlier took very offensive with regarding to states not filing affidavit with regarding to operation and implementation on migrant laborers. Apex Court also told authorities to withdraw criminal cases against migrant laborers. Parliament Standing Committee on Labour recently submitted a report to the Lok Sabha so that they could create a social security fund. Some good things are actually happening. In fact, Karnataka government is planning to build transit homes accommodating 3,000 laborers in each, so that they can have their own home as well as kitchen for them to cook their own meals, and they will pay a very, very nominal fee. Bollywood actor Sonu Sood, who became a real-life hero for helping the migrant workers during the lockdown, is all set to bring about 2 lakh people suffering outside India, migrant laborers. Okay. MCC also had its role with regarding to migrant laborers. I think during lockdown, along with social department, some of us were involved with helping the migrant laborers, and especially MCC tried to provide food for migrant laborers who left Tamil Nadu to their respective towns by trains. For almost 2 trains, nearly about 4,500 people for 2 days were provided with food that we packed as teachers and some students here in college who were at that time, and the college was kind enough to contribute the amount towards that. And the social work department took the lead and did this, and we are so happy that we were some help to the migrant laborers in India. Some feel that migrant laborers' stoicism reveals the shallowness of Indian democracy. So I think it's pertinent to have a lecture delivered by a specialist like Dr. Parivelan for our benefit. We are privileged to have you, Pari, and I congratulate the association office bearers for arranging this event. Thank you one and all, and God bless.
Thank you, sir. We are deeply honored by the presence of our esteemed speaker, Dr. K.M. Parivelan. Without any further delay, now I would like to call upon Sang Mo from MA to briefly introduce the speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I have immense pleasure in introducing to you our speaker of today's lecture, Dr. K.M. Parivelan. Dr. K.M. Parivelan is serving as chairperson and associate professor, Center for Statelessness and Refugee Studies, School of Law, Rights and Constitutional Governance, Tata Institute of Social Science in Mumbai since June 2013. Previously, he was part of developing and launching the IFRC's online global disaster management program at TIS. He also served at UNDP, facilitating the post-tsunami recovery process in India, and UNHCR, facilitating the voluntary repatriation of Sri Lankan refugees. He is interested in themes such as access to justice, human rights and humanitarian issues, refugee law and statelessness issues, disaster management and environmental issues. He is guiding doctoral research scholars and teaching subjects like law and justice in globalizing world, international humanitarian and human rights laws, disaster and development. He has set up the Center for Statelessness and Refugee Studies at TIS in collaboration with UNHCR since 2016. He has organized several conferences, seminars, and symposiums. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We look forward to listening to you.
Josephine,
Sir?
with your permission, can I speak for a minute?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
I'm sorry. I think I failed in my duty if I don't introduce the staff of the Department of Political Science, whom Dr. Pari was part of. And I think Dr. Pari will also be eager to see them. So I think if the teachers can put your video on, and if you are able to say hello to Dr. Pari, your screen will be visible on Spotlight. Okay. The first will be Dr. N.M. Hariharan.
Hi, good morning. Hi, hello. Hi, Pari. Good morning to everyone.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And the next person will be Dr. Sridhar.
Pari, good morning, Pari. Welcome back. Always a pleasure to have you back with us.
Pleasure to see you all here.
Then it will be Dr. Sudha.
Hello, sir. Good morning. I think we met in one of the earlier programs.
Yes.
Very nice to have you.
Then it will be Professor Divyan.
Hello, sir. We had met once inside the department. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Then it's Professor Vidya.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, sir.
Hi.
So happy to have you with us today. Hello.
And it will be Dr. Ashik.
Pari sir was my teacher, so he knows me more than anybody else. Hi, sir.
Nice to see you.
And Dr. Hans.
Hello, sir. Morning.
I've been interacting with you. Hi.
Yeah.
And then it's Professor Adarsh.
Hi, sir. Happy to meet you, sir.
Hi. Nice to see you all. Great.
We have two new babies that have been added only yesterday, but they are quite old. Professor Joseph Rajan.
Hi.
Joseph, are you there?
Hi, sir. Nice to meet you.
Joseph Rajan and Professor Kiran Rahul.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir. Very nice to meet you, sir.
Nice.
Just joined yesterday.
Great.
So nice to have you. Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
for
sir.
accepting our invitation. I leave it. You can carry on. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry to come in. I thought it's my duty to introduce the teachers.
Yes, indeed. It's good.
Yeah. Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I invite Professor Ash J. Bonaparte to introduce the topic and enhance our understanding of the subject.
Good morning, all. Parisa, head of the department, my teachers, students. Head of the department has already set the stage. So what am I going to say? I don't know, because he's given an elaborate overview on the issues faced by the migrants. Parisa was my teacher during my master's days. So for students, if I'm really doing well in my classes, then credit goes to me. If I'm not doing well, then credit goes to Parisa. That's how I always put it up. Looking at the COVID scenario and how India has changed over the last few months, only a handful of people are, of course, an authority in this area. Parisa is one such authority. In fact, Parisa has been working on issues of statelessness, refugees and migrants for more than, so it should be around 20 years now, right? When you joined the UNHCR, from the time onwards, you have been personally involved. I've also been working with Parisa in various meetings, and Parisa is a real authority to speak in this area. Our head of the department raised this concern with regard to the government statement in the parliament as to there's no deaths in the government does not have the number of people who died in the during the migration after the lockdown that started in the month of March. It's a sad reality that we are looking at. Even versus the private numbers from the World Bank and other sources, it's over 40 million people have migrated from throughout India to various places, but the government wouldn't want to acknowledge it. Government they have their own numbers, but again, just that they are not keen in acknowledging the exact number. That's a irony that we really need to look at. So also raises matter of the department, the labor department, which does not account to the people who have been, though the migrants fall under the labor department, yet they have not been accounted as to how the migration happened. Every year, the labor department collects millions and millions of rupees from various quarters, from state government, from the corporate office, from the construction industry. But sadly, the money that they spend is not even 10% on the migrants. What have they spent on? If you look at the statistics, they would say that they've spent on capacity building, the security, etc. Sometimes even compensation. In a very few cases, in reality, there are over 50 to 60 crores sitting there in the government without being touched at all. Can't they spend in taking the people back to their homes? Government did not spend it. And the way we shut down the country in less than 2-3 days, the lives of people were really taken for a long ride. I wouldn't want to continue longer because Parisa is here. So my now request Parisa to deliver the special lecture on COVID and the issues faced by the migrants. Over to Parisa.
Thank you. Very good morning to one and all. The outset, it is indeed a tremendous excitement and pleasure for me to join, all of you. As it is said that it is something like a homecoming for me, connected via online. I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
right.
sir.
So it's something like a homecoming and being connected with a family which I was and I am associated. My gratitude to all my teachers who are here now and continue to interact. Indeed, last time when I had come down for another conference organized by Department of Social Work, I could drop in, and in a short span, there was a lecture arranged. I had just done a study on the NRC, and I just came down, shared, and now I just a week back got this instantaneous invitation. I said, why not? Whatever I have work, I will keep it aside and join. That's how I just said I will come in. So thanks for organizing, all the organizers, Department of Political Science and the Political Science Association. It's really great indeed to join and share some thoughts. It may not be a very in-depth research or anything, but I thought I will put my line of academic as well as certain practical experiences which I have learned from my days of UNDP, particularly United Nations Development Program, when we had worked on facilitating the post-tsunami recovery, working with the governments, civil society, and the UN. We had brought in a body called the United Nations Team for Recovery Support. I was part of that endeavor, and we gave a lot of policy inputs on various facets of rehabilitation and reconstruction. And it is in that line that I had, 2005 to 8, had a lot of opportunity to interact with our national bodies like NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. And I could see the Disaster Management Act emerging in 2005, and very closely interacted with some of the members of the body. And at some point, I had also the privilege of being invited as a national task force member to advise the NDMA, which is shaping the national disaster management policies and programs. From there till today, I'm just trying to look at, I came back to academia again at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, because my family wanted to move to Mumbai, and the reason then I came in and joined here in academia. Then Tata Institute again gives this great opportunity to blend academics and practical issues, and so one gets connected. So I wanted to share what I had observed with the disaster management structures in the country, and what is happening, and what are the gaps still. Is my screen visible? Is it?
Yes, sir, but the presentation is not visible.
Is it visible now? Is my screen visible now? The presentation?
The screen is visible, sir. However, the presentation, the PPT is not visible, sir.
Oh, I see. Slightly, I'm more familiar with the Zoom. Here, let me just check once the or Ms. Shruti, would you like, I have shared the PPT with you, would you like to?
Yes, I can do that, sir.
I think slightly I'm having this, okay. That will be great if you could support me in posting the presentation.
Yes, no problem, sir. Sir, if you could please stop sharing your screen, I'll be able to share mine, sir.
Yes, I will do that. I'll just.
Okay. Right. Thank you, sir.
All right, so let the screen come, and I'll just, I can take about 30 to 40 minutes for this presentation, and maybe 30 minutes of discussion. Is it all right, time-wise?
Yes.
Kindly remind me, maybe.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sir, was the screen visible, sir? Is it visible?
Yes, I could see the screen, yes.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. We can go to the first slide. So the outline is that, what is this COVID, the novel coronavirus or COVID-19, as we all are talking about as a context, and what kind of an impact it is making in the various realms of society, economy, polity, environment. One can, go on. So I think it has brought in a lot of paradigm shift globally in very many facets of our life. When we are wondering, on our day-to-day life, our everydayness, everything has changed and altered. We all know that, we acknowledge that. And similarly, the various policies and perspectives on how we are governing ourselves and all that. So we are also, in this particular presentation of mine, we are going to look at how COVID impacts in general, and how it particularly impacts the vulnerable groups, especially in the realm of forced migration, which constitutes, of course, as said by Professor Christie, laborers are the ones who are majorly hit earlier, and then, of course, there are many who are affected. And I would also wanted to contextualize the theme of forced migration as a theme where it has got back and forth effect. Of course, we are going to contextualize a bit on what are the disaster management laws and structures we have. What are the kind of, first slide, please. Next slide. Labor laws, security, what are the things available in our constitution, human rights, and frameworks we will, try to look at. I'll start by, next slide, please. I'll start with a few questions, what kind of, new borders have emerged? We always know that nation states do have borders. And as we are moving into an age of globalization, we were imagining that we are, going to see a borderless world where we are going to, interact economically, politically, diplomatically, and move into a new world. But the new world is also a sort of an uncertain world, as it has been named by our current Minister of External Affairs, who happened to be my senior alumni at Jawaharlal Nehru University. I'm referring to Dr. Jaishankar, former Foreign Secretary and the current, External Affairs Minister, who has returned the India's way in an uncertain world. So I think we are living in an uncertain world where, there were lots of challenges emerging for the humanitarian field, particularly for refugees, stateless, asylum seekers, and things like that. But now the COVID has brought in a kind of probably a new borders, new issues on, probably a difference between younger age generation to older age generation, probably between the ones who are, socially, economically well off and those who are marginalized, poor, vulnerable, and all that's, kind of new borders are emerging. So one would like to, see and understand how this is going to pose a challenge for us. This is one question which I have. And then whether, we are going to have, the issues of citizen, non-citizen, which have already been triggered, some time back. I'm going back again to the pre-COVID a little bit on the debates on NRC, National Register of Citizens, or is it CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act. That again reinvokes that who is a real citizen and who is non-citizen, and what are the kind of challenges we have. Those people who have perished in the reverse migration, are they citizens truly? Do they have rights? If so, do we have an obligation? Did they have the right to life? Did they have the right to dignity, which are guaranteed in our constitution? These are some questions one needs to address. Whether the kind of labor, particularly the migrant labor, who had contributed to our nation building infrastructures in the cities and towns, suddenly have become a kind of an invisible population. And then we became mute spectators, watching them suffer, watching them marching back, women, children, elderly people, all. So you also see a kind of intersectionality of gender, caste, class, religion, and all these fault lines emerged to us. And then did we really address, truly their needs? Is a big question mark. Is COVID a disaster itself, or is it an induced disaster? Did we have the right kind of understanding, right kind of policies, right kind of infrastructures, particularly health access? And this entirely brings in a gambit, when we are talking about COVID, migrant labor, this kind of an issue, it again brings us an ethical question that what kind of a society we have, what kind of socio-economic conditions we offered them. Did we really take care of these migrants, and had we given them a safe housing, had we given them safe livelihoods, had they given them a safe social security, will they all would have suffered like this? Just because they were so fragile, so invisible, that these kind of a thing, sudden lockdown, and it pushed them a lot and had a tremendous effect on them. So something like that we would like to raise questions and try to see what can we do to address it. Next, please. So I'm trying to take the gambit of how next, please. I'm trying to take the gambit of COVID and its impact on forced migration, a term which many of us must be very familiar, but I would, So forced migration is a very broad, generic term we are using in the last, couple of decades, looking at the global issues of humanitarian concern, where it refers to the movement of people who are affected, who are persecuted, who are helpless, who become, asylum seekers or refugees, or even the term internally displaced people, becomes a very broad category who are affected by conflicts, disasters, or even development-induced. We use the term IDPs, internally displaced persons, where today's gambit of COVID and the migrant laborers would fall under the IDPs. And then, you have, besides conflicts, natural, environmental disasters, or biohazards, which we are again going to contextualize today, the COVID, as a biohazard, or other kinds of things, which could affect chemical, nuclear disasters, famine, developmental projects. So, what kind of displacement and what kind of policies we have? How do we address them? We'll bring in this whole, discourse on forced migration. So I want to keep forced migration as a context. Next, please. So today, I shared a similar statistics, if I remember, in the previous, lecture I've had. I always use this UNHCR thing on forced migration. This is, mind you, which the governments share the data. And then today you have almost around 9.5 million or almost 80 million people who are forcefully displaced worldwide. I'm sure we can, add another 50% of this number, because there are a lot of unaccounted during this COVID period. People would have been stressed, displaced, affected. So these are official statistics available with UNHCR, which collates. But these numbers itself has had a steep rise in the last 1 decade or so. My line of work with UNHCR, when I was working with UN Refugee Agency and facilitated the Sri Lankan refugee repatriation, the numbers were somewhere around 20-25 million. Today, almost you have a threefold rise, thanks to several instabilities in the global scenario, particularly the conflict in West Asia, Syria, and today's Central African Republic, or the Venezuelan crisis. So many things are pushing people, and a lot of things are happening. I'm sure these statistics of refugees 26 million, IDPs 45.7, statelessness around 5.6 to 10. All these numbers are quite minimal from the point of view of UNHCR. But if you are bringing COVID, we know that within our country we have numbers ranging between 4 to almost 8-9 million people internally displaced just in COVID alone, and right from the post-independence period, where we have several other million people who would be affected. We know that. Yeah, next please. So the forced migration would look at conflict-induced displacement, the conflicts ranging from civil war, generalized violence, and other discriminations which could lead to conflict. It could also include the development-induced displacement, development of several projects, infrastructural projects, and things like that, and disaster-induced. So disaster, again, I would like to introduce that it is a range of things could constitute there: nature-induced, human-induced, environmental, industrial. Biohazards. Today we can bring in biological disasters and so on and so forth, which we are keeping a context. So therefore I am using the broader term forced migration just to introduce it as a conceptual one. Yeah, next please. So we all know the terms of refugees, asylum seekers. I will not go in again. We all are familiar as students of political science. Yeah, next please. Internally displaced is something as a context we are keeping. So the internal displacement, we all would know. Somebody is a refugee who has crossed an international border and sought asylum and seeking protection for the reasons of persecution, as we would know. In a similar context, IDP is one thing which people are within the nation state borders affected, but what kind of governance we have. For a long we did not have. So in the late 90s, the UN Secretary General had constituted a committee under Francis Deng, Dr. Francis Deng, who went about creating a kind of guiding principles on internal displacement. I think this is an important framework which today's COVID and internal displacement we can look at. What are the kind of a thing. So it is actually the sovereign states which are supposed to take care of the internal displacement. Whereas if you're a refugee or an asylum seeker, the international regime, the international law would actually come and apply, and there are certain conventions for refugees and all which are applicable. For the IDPs, internally displaced persons, this is the only principle which at the international level is available. And through a Kampala Convention, which happened in 2011-12, today it has also become a kind of a legal framework. Particularly the African Union took it up when they had faced conflicts and other famines and other complex emergencies which came up. They felt that the people are trapped within the borders, and then the international law could not work. Therefore, IDP notion has to come in, and then they had formally the African Union has endorsed it, and today it has become a legal instrument through the Kampala Convention, which is relevant again. We'll come back to that later. Next, please. So the UN guiding principles has around 30 principles which are very important, where the nation states, the non-state actors, all have to come in and then apply and see. It touches on the basic rights which are there. Even if you're internally displaced, you are you have certain basic rights which needs to be protected from being arbitrarily displaced, from protection from displacement, and your right to safely return, resettle, reintegrate. All these are invoked in the UN guiding principles. Yeah. Next. So now we will come to COVID and disaster. For example, if you have to take the definition which comes in our National Disaster Management Act, as well as the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, they bring in the definition of a disaster as something where a society, community, or a nation is affected by an incident or a phenomenon, which could be human-induced, which could be nature-induced, which could be a variety of things, ranging from the climate-induced, hydrometeorological, geological, industrial, chemical, accident-related, or even biological, which we are talking today as a context. So range of them could be there. If that phenomenon or an event or an incident affects the society and impacts the economy, polity, environment, and causes loss of lives, injuries, and which is beyond the coping mechanism, coping capacity of that society or a community concerned using its own resources, we call the term disaster. So the underlying thing here is that something which impacts us and which is beyond our coping capacity. The word coping capacity is very important. That's where I'm trying to draw the definition. So you have a variety of incidences which are there if you have to bring in the COVID as a context. And then when you're saying that, whether COVID was within our capacity or beyond our capacity. So obviously the entire, not only India, but entire world understood that it is something beyond our capacity, that it has come in and impacted all our movement, and everything came to a kind of a standstill. So that's how we are here. The important thing to understand is that the term disaster would combine something called hazard. If you take a biological thing called COVID, now combination of hazard and your vulnerability. Your vulnerability is what prevails in you. Your unpreparedness is your vulnerability. That if you have adequate medical infrastructure, hospital, and all that, which are very important, then it becomes something very relevant. If you do not have, then you become vulnerable. So the combination of hazard and vulnerability combines, and that is where it sharpens the risk factors and increases your disaster potential. If you have capacities in a inversely proportional, meaning that you have all these infrastructures, all your ability, then you will be able to cope with that. So hazard into vulnerability divided by capacity is your disaster. So hazard and vulnerability on one side and your capacity is inversely proportional. If you have a higher capacity in terms of COVID, if you have hospital facilities, infrastructures, communications, and your people are able to understand, cope with it, we could handle it much better. If not, we are going to suffer. So if you are, preemptively trying to put in something like a lockdown as a measure because you don't have adequate capacity, that's where we are actually bringing in other risks. So COVID is not a direct risk, but COVID-related new laws, new policies which we have invoked have tremendously impacted people as well, which we are going to look at. Next, please. So the type of hazards I've listed already, which are there, we are looking at amongst them the biological, which is very important to understand as well. And biological is something where we are always ignored into the gambit of disasters, because in my line of work and experiences also on the National Disaster Management Act, policies and perspectives which have emerged have influenced from a variety of international inputs as well. We have had specifically the HIGO framework for action in 2005 to 15. And then from 15 to 2030, today we have Sendai framework on addressing various facets of disasters. These have inputted and shaped our national policy with our own internal experience of looking at variety of disasters in the past, such as the Odisha super cyclone, or the Bhuj earthquake, or the Indian Ocean tsunami, or the Kashmir earthquake, the Uttarakhand floods. And so on and so forth, the Chennai flood and Kerala floods, all that we could contextualize. So that's how the national policies are shaped to by the experiences of natural disasters. But it is not much inputted from the biological disasters, I feel, even though we have had one at the international and the national level, something called H1N1 pandemic influenza. If you remember the swine flu, as well as bird flu as well, these are the things which have kind of given us an introduction. And we have always experienced something like chikungunya, where the ICMR, Indian Council for Medical Research, still could not, really understand what are the background, what is the origin to that. But we know that H1N1 pandemic influenza and the chikungunya kind of diseases have been living with us. It has been there, for several years now. They continue to impact us and they continue to be with us, and we are trying to cope with it. And we are also warned that even this COVID could be there for several years with us, and we need to kind of cope with it. So how do we cope and how do we manage? We need to see. Next, please. So underneath the biohazards, the infectious diseases outbreak, which I just named. There are several who have been there in the history. One goes back to the Spanish flu, somewhere around 1917, 18, which, hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Can hear you.
Yeah, I hope there is some interruption, I think. I hope the connectivity is there. I'm audible. Yeah, so one could, recall the, time of the Spanish flu, which came up and, shook the entire world. And some of these British archives provides an interest, very, the painful information about how millions of people died. And even in the British India, there were several millions who died in India alone, several lakhs who died. And these records, one does not remember in the contemporary discourse on how the disease outbreak could, kill massively so many number of people. I think everybody now goes to refer to that massive Spanish flu of, more than the World War I deaths. The Spanish flu has killed 1917, 1918. It had killed several people. For a couple of years it went, and there was a second wave, and all that stuff we are learning. This was referred when we were just facing the H1N1 pandemic influenza somewhere around 2010-11, where again, we had the opportunity to go to the Ministry of Health, which conducted certain orientations. We had a microbiologist who had come from United States, and he was recalling about the Spanish flu, and then was contextualizing H1N1, and he mentioned that one important lesson we learn and do is that he was saying that namaste is the only solution. We couldn't understand, but he explained at that time when it was just emerging, and newly he said that the contamination spreads through body to body, human to human. Therefore, we need to not touch each other, and then try to listen the thing. So that is where we learned, and today we have come to learn about mask and hand wash, and then how we should keep the if not the word social distance, again a problematic term, physical distance we need to maintain to ensure that the disease does not affect us and impact us. So this is teaching a lesson. So there are some of these which are biohazards are very important to understand in our national policies, and what are the ways to do it, not just to give a sudden wake-up call by looking at it. Then it also puts into question what kind of infrastructure and facilities we have and laws to address all this. Yeah, next please. Yeah, can we go to the next slide please? Yeah. So if you see in the statistics, where you have 100 years of data put in, and then the line which moves up is the natural disasters are on the increase. Along with it, you have also the emergence of the biological disasters. That is something which converges and brings an alert for us that these are not random. Today you have a pattern emerging. We are studying about climate from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and other bodies which are studying and telling us that as a society, as we are emerging, we are also becoming a risk society in which our developmental activities and other things are impacting the climate, and in turn, the global warming climate is impacting the natural disasters. So we have natural disasters in the last 2 decades have been increasing, compounding. Along with it, when you have the change in the global warming and climate change, it also leads to new diseases getting muted, and new diseases are getting released. So that also brings us a question mark that why does a COVID kind of a thing emerge? We all know that it emerged from Wuhan, China, but why it did so, we don't that, and others are working, researching on it. So therefore, there is, I would call it a pattern where the natural disasters, climate is also linked to the kind of disease which you could see this 100-year data, and then the biological variety also is heightening in the last 1 or 2 decades. So I think that is also something that we need to cope up and understand that the larger gambit of disasters, how the biological disasters are also posing us a challenge. So we have, a context of, yeah, next slide, please. So we have the coronavirus, which is a new stream, not new. There were SARS, MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, severe acute respiratory syndrome, all that are there. Since it's a new strain which has emerged from that, we call it novel coronavirus, meaning a new virus, according to the WHO and all that. So today we have a context where it's yeah, next week. We have a context where nearly that coronavirus has reaching a numbers where today India has almost become the second highest number of yeah, next week. Second highest number of cases we have. I think as of the statistics available, we have almost now crossed the 5 million benchmark in India. And at the global level, it is touching the 30 million. And I think there are only 2 countries which are there. One, the United States on the top, and then probably India is, emerging high. As somebody had said earlier that India and the United States are 2 natural lives. It looks like today in the context of COVID that we both are actually going very close, very competing and going very close by. So it's a matter of concern. What is going to be the high number, and when are we going to flatten the curve? Is what we are looking at it, and in the midst of it, the economic pressure is putting so much on us that we are trying to also see that we would get into address this issue. We have a context of 30 million numbers globally. India is crossing 5 million. Number of deaths are almost touching 1 lakh. So it brings a matter of concern. Now let's look at the COVID impact on the marginalized and vulnerable, particularly as a context. So we have nearly officially recorded 22% of India as a below poverty line, and it could be almost 30% 25 to 30% even officially. And then today, COVID is going to increase tremendously in the last 5-6 months of impact. Probably many more millions, crores would join this thing, percentage of India's population. Something that is a context, the socio-economic dimension is something very important. And we need to start by asking the question, when we say that the COVID has impacted on the migrant laborers and the reverse migration, which has caused a tremendous stress. So we should start by asking the first question: why will the movement of people from the rural to urban, this itself will operate on both the push and pull factors, as we all know, that the large number of Indian masses living in the rural areas have tremendous push factors operating that they are not able to continue to sustain when they come to urban areas for survival. So that is something, a context we need to have. And do we have adequate number of these kind of movement of migrant labor coming from some of the states we know, which are far more socially, economically backward and underdeveloped, which pushes them to the urban centers. So therefore, during this kind of a crisis, we saw the reverse migration of people moving, and that's where as Professor Christopher himself, Professor Christie was mentioning about a comparison, rightly pointed out. Even I do. Yeah, next slide, please. It is something we had seen very close to the partition times, where the movement of people of that scale, that kind of a thing, where So, you can look at the migration and movement of people mentioned in this kind of a map. You would see that the reverse migration has happened, all concentrating back to, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and parts of Rajasthan, where the people have moved back large in numbers. And, that shows that how the emerging states, how they got affected, with a lot of insecurity, struggle, they moved back. What happened in terms of, that they could stay in their very villages and manage, or are they going to again come back, or some of them are coming back? So all this, puts into question of what kind of, impact on this movement of people, and what kind of policies, programs we have. Of course, as it has been mentioned in the introduction, we have lots of packages talked about, that road and things like that. Now, one sees whether this is a kind of relief money to address the people in need, or is it a kind of totally to regenerate our economy and then bring back everything on board. We have to see really how this is going to work. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is where you mentioned that something similar partition, which had about 14 million people crossing the limit from India. Something similar, international, national approvals the movement of people, and it's
Parivelan, your voice is feeble.
People trapped, and then there's no facility, no movement. Couple of months back, how they suffered. Okay.
Now it is good, sir. Now it is good, sir.
Is I'll try to post my now. Okay. All right. So I can also, as suggested, close my video if the option is going to help a little better. 1 second. Let me just. So I'll keep my audio and continue. So this is something very tremendously. Somebody is working in the field of forced migration. One gets, one looks at this kind of vast displacement of people struggling to go back, and there was no proper transport arrangement. There was no clarity on how to do that. Then the sad part of it in terms of helplessly when people were making their efforts in terms of trekking back, walking on their own, and people dying because of thirst, hunger, these kind of things which we have seen, whatever we could see a minuscule or a tip of an iceberg through the media, is something very disheartening, that why we did not put certain organized things in place. The very reason is that we did not have data. as it has been mentioned, neither we have data now, nor we had a data earlier in terms of looking at who are these people, what are the numbers, what are the requirements, and all we said is in the name of safety and health and saving lives, that we would invoke something of this sort. So that precisely brings in a point that those who are in the below poverty line, those who are in the bottom of the pyramid, do we have them, their voices, in the governance is what one has a question. Next slide, please. So here it's important to look at how the poverty and migration are very important and interrelated issues. So as we said that we have 22% officially, today it could be almost 35–40% of the people who may be in the bottom of the pyramid we call below poverty line, and the kind of movement are first level of migrants emerging out from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Odisha, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, Assam, probably Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. These are the states where people had come in. And according to some of the census of 2011, when you look at it, nearly about 54.3 million have migrated from these states to the towns and cities. And it is these people, these many million, plus other unaccounted numbers, have started going in reverse because of fear of unknown future. What is the future? Limited employment scope, a financial crisis, a lack of shelter, lack of facilities, health access. This is where the poverty and migration and reverse migration had happened. Yeah, next, please. So the World Bank in one of its report had said that nearly about 40 million are affected in India, and then we said that it could be ranging from almost 4 crore people to almost 8–9 crore people are affected, and this movement has brought in a tremendous impact. So here they have invoked something, the Disaster Management Act and the Epidemic Act in several states. Now the question here is, were these very thoughtful? Did this really take into cognizance of what kind of impact this lockdown is going to have? And is this lockdown merely just to take a borrowed time, or is it really that we are taking this conscious effort, looking at various aspects? Now, one important thing comes in here also. The economy and today the statistics are showing the contraction. The way the economy is contracting almost to the tune of 23 to 24%, which is something very tremendously negative kind of a growth. So how much it is going to have a consequence to the already weakened economy is something which we have to look into, because this has a tremendous effect. So the suffering of people is something unimaginable and unacceptable, in terms of bringing them all under the gambit of forced migration as internally displaced people. Why we were lethargic and not able to take cognizance of their needs, and the very movement had given us a picture of helplessness as a nation. That why we could not plan adequately, why we could not take adequate precautions, adequate measures to address their needs. Next, please. So these are the visuals we saw. Men, women, elderly, children moving helplessly with whatever belongings they could have. Waves of people whichever came in the media. Next, please. So looking at these effect. Now I'm going to share a couple of things about what various research institutions, academia, and other institutions have attempted. From TSS again, our team of students and colleagues have started mapping these issues. For example, I have a link here, and also the next page. Can you go, please? So we were trying to look at the desperation at the time. And we were trying to bring in certain responses, which I thought some of them I will share here. Yeah, next please. So So, one tries to look at the mobility as a concern at the time, and then we came up with some solutions in terms of mapping. We called it the transport grid for the migrants, looking at their mobility concern. And next, please. So we tried to suggest that from which are the pockets, where are the people stranded, what are the kind of transport options available, and what is the volume of modes and means of transport which could be arranged is what they have mapped and given a few things. So some policy briefs were brought out. Just a couple of them I'm sharing here. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this, if you look at, for example, the people who are the migrants who had come from Uttar Pradesh, now from various states, wherever they are, and what are the nearby stations in which we could arrange our railways primarily as our national transport, and looking at the volume of people, looking at if 50% of the volume of migrants had to move in the first orange level, how many number of trains which will be required. In the green, if it is just merely 25%, if they have to leave, from which are the stations, which are the number of trains, how many coaches, how they could be arranged for transportation. This is where a mapping was done, and one tries to imagine the quantum of impact, the uncertainty, the challenge, and this was proposed as a kind of a transport grid as a need at the time. This was very well received, referred, and used. Yeah, next slide, please. So there are for each state specific migrants movement. It is there. I'm just using a couple of them for Uttar Pradesh and Jharkhand alone as an example. So these are the kind of challenges for each of them. Ranging from what kind of a transport, if they moved back, what are the policies and other measures which we may have to bring in, what kind of economic revival which will take place. All these are, I think, a matter of big concern. And how many more minutes I have? Just to hello.
Time, take your own time.
Okay, all right. I'll take probably another 5 or 7 minutes and then wrap it up. So one tries to look at the various facets of it, and then the quantum, the impact, and the people who have done the reverse migration. What is the kind of economic avenue? What is the kind of economic thing which we have to see? So as I referred earlier, that variety of things were spelled out for reviving our micro, mini and small, small enterprises, the migrant laborers who are returned, and what are the things the government has announced? Almost 20 lakh crore package. Now this is the package not as a direct relief, so nobody gets the money directly, but these are all done as a booster within the economic model in order to to revive the economy. So one side it is appreciable, but really, is it really percolating into the state level and into the is it having any change? We have to see for the time to come. But what I would say is that in terms of these massive impact on our economy in general and on the migrant laborers, I think we have to really conduct more studies to understand at the micro level, as Professor Christie was mentioning. What are the number of people, what are the skills they have, what are the kind of livelihoods we can regenerate and provide them the livelihood diversification, livelihood scope. All have to be seen, and I think it's tremendous. So whatever it is being offered, the numbers seem very big money, but in terms of real population to the individual level, to the family level, and whether it could bring in a kind of a livelihood revival, we have to see. I think that is something, a tremendous challenge, where I think we all need to raise to the occasions where the states have to have a very big role to take care of these migrants who are come in reverse and facilitate in case things are better, they could go back and do. Now people are on their own. That's the point, that there had never been any systematic information, never been any systematic, facilities, infrastructures to take them back and revive the the work and livelihood options. So I think that makes us to entirely revamp, relook at the kind of socio-economic approach we have towards the people in the bottom of the pyramid, the official 22% or the unofficial 30-35% of the people, I think this is something, a time for us to pause and relook at COVID and post-COVID. How are we going to manage? Next. So now I'm coming to also the other segment of people besides the migrant laborers who are on the gambit of internal displacement. We are also having other vulnerable people who are living, and who are affected, displaced at the global level, also at the national level, the refugees, the stateless population, which are very important. Again, I think I had spoken earlier about statelessness at the Department of Political Science. I'm not going to the detail, but I'll just touch them. The refugees, as we know, are the people who are persecuted, affected, come to the country as asylum seekers or as a refugee. We have a context where India is not officially a refugee convention signed country, but yet we have historically been hosting refugees. Even now at given time, we have 3.5 lakh people ranging from Tibetans, Sri Lankan refugees, Chakmas, Rohingyas as refugees. We also have some of the people as stateless population, meaning that by law that they don't have a nationality. That's a new endeavor, new area we are trying to explore and identify. Somebody called West Pakistan refugees, but coming during the period of independence, 1947-48, but till now lingered as people who did not get a full citizenship. But today, the good or bad, whatever reorganization of the Jammu and Kashmir and related revoking of Article 370, 35A, these all have led to a little of light, a kind of a silver, silver lining, in the dark clouds, kind of a thing, where these people are now probably going to shift from de facto statelessness to a kind of a de jure citizenship. These are some things which we need to map and understand. I referred about the NRC in my previous presentation. I think that has almost brought in around 19 lakh people as excluded. And during the COVID, what happens to these 19 lakh people? Do they avail any of the benefits? Do they avail any of the, things? Is something very important one has to look at. That's what I mean by here, a challenge from forced migration, where lots of invisible, marginalized population, besides our own citizens, you have also these kind of people who are coming. So our, governance towards these people are, officially, we don't have a record of refugees except the ones which are provided by UNHCR data. We don't have any clear data on stateless population, particularly the center which I have initiated at TISS. We are attempting to map and bring these invisible people. So you have several lakhs who are already very invisible, who don't have the citizenship rights. So in this context, we are triggering a new NRC, CAA, kind of a thing which is going to pose new challenges, a securitized regime where we are going to create more stateless population. If this be so, what kind of access to rights they will have, when their variety of rights are going to be denied, and the COVID kind of a thing brings them, compounds the problem where you are not able to bring them into any gambit. If our citizens who are our own internal migrant laborers are suffering, what happens to these invisible population of refugees, asylum seekers, and stateless population is also a big matter of concern. Only hope is that civil society, academia have to raise up to the occasion. Whatever we could map and whatever we could advocate, I think we need to continue that endeavor and ensuring that these people are brought into the gambit of right to life, right to protection, as it has been invoked by on several interesting judgments by our Supreme Court. So the judiciary has given a kind of a perspective, and as well as the international law also provides the customary law provisions where you have to take care of these people who are affected, helpless. Today you have whether the UN Secretary General Guterres or other UN Human Rights Council and other UNHCR as a body keeps telling that the population on the move including one in the Greece as a recent example, where the camps had a fire accident, the Mori camp I'm referring to. You have globally also the helplessness of the refugees and stateless has been there, besides our own population, which is affected and suffering. So I would like to invoke the broader gambit of forced migration is an important area to understand, not as a charity, but as a humanitarian perspective, as a student of political science and international relations. How do we take care of these people who are in stress, these people who are in a great danger because of lack of adequate protective laws, lack of adequate access to justice, lack of adequate human rights? There are several provisions. Next, please. Several provisions which are available in the international law and the national law. Are we able to truly take care of it? For example, here ranging from Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Civil Political Rights, elimination of racial discrimination, Convention on Eliminating Discrimination Against Women, Convention on Child Rights. We have International Convention on Protecting the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of the Family, and so on and so forth, the disability rights. So we have several of them where India is already a signatory. Are we able to really invoke all these to protect people in terms of this kind of a COVID as a stress factor, and also which manifests their plight? I think we need to kind of revamp all our legal, socio-legal things. We need to revamp our governance, ensuring that we can make it inclusive, ensuring that we don't leave anyone behind, as it has been emphasized by the sustainable development goals, which we are very much part of the development pursuit. I think we need to invoke, reimagine ourselves, and ensuring that we don't go into the parochial nationalism, and we don't leave anyone behind, but we need to, I think, ensure that we are able to protect our diversity, multiculturalism vis-a-vis culture, language, religion, and ensuring that we also can become, cosmopolitan humanitarians in a way that we could address all the global issues which are compounding. And I think COVID perhaps is a kind of, right kind of an opportunity for us to pause, rethink and reimagine ourselves, ensuring that we can have better laws, better things. But to conclude, what we have is also laws which are becoming insensitive. Just during the COVID, there are many attempts made by the government. Some of the things are, we have amended the labor laws, which were more progressive in line with international, labor organization and progressive things. But today we are also kind of diluting those labor protection and trying to say that, in order to protect the corporate and industries, that it is up to them to see what rights and what protection they can have for the labor. I think we need to now revisit it and protect that one. Number two, these numbers of people, migration, movement, helplessness, and other stress push factors, which people are moving forward or reverse, we need to, I think, take cognizance of it and evolve laws and make economic policies to address it. And thirdly, we need to think also look into these populations, such as refugees and stateless ones, which are quite not clear how they are going to be taken care of, and what are the ways in which we are going to protect them. After the end of the day, I think, as the saying goes, that we are living in a globalized world, and in a globalized world, we invoke Yadum Yavarum, or the Vasudeva Kudumba, as it is said. If this be so, that we are world as one family, I think we need to understand, address, and bring issues both from global perspectives and national perspectives, where there are international theories such as regime theory or functional theories, which emphasizes that we need to ensure that our laws, our governance is in line with international standards, which have been international laws, international conventions, and we need to, I think, use the regional frameworks such as SAARC, ASEAN, BIMSTEC, which is available in the region, to cooperate again with other nation states. I think COVID has again brought in the need for international cooperation, whether it is India, which has done a big contribution in terms of pharmacy, providing medicines to the globe. Vice versa, I think we also need to think of international cooperation, ensuring that the good practices and good lessons from other countries are brought in and brought into our laws and policies and our governance. I think we need to keep humanity in the forefront when we are addressing these issues. I think I'll stop here and take questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insightful thoughts. Now the floor is open for the questions. I request all of you to kindly unmute your microphones while asking the questions and mute it once you're done.
So, may I ask a question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Can the act of migration in itself, with particular regard to the laborers, migrant laborers, can it be perceived as a failure on the part of the government because it is more primarily due to lack of opportunities that they are forced to migrate?
Very precisely. I think, yes, that brings us to the thing that each state, when you have some underdeveloped states in which these population have moved in the first place. So I think we need to look at what kind of socio-economic conditions prevail. This is a kind of a migration which is from rural to urban and from one state to another, when there is always a distress factor. There's always a push factor that the traditional livelihoods, their activities, they could not sustain. Therefore, out of abject poverty that these people have migrated. So that is something I think we need to understand, that phenomenon. And wherever they had come in and worked in the urban centers, we need to look at what kind of minimum wages they were getting, what kind of living conditions they have had, what kind of infrastructure access they had, particularly in terms of shelter, in terms of health access, in terms of their basic facilities. If these were secure, then we wouldn't have had this much of a panic. If there is some kind of a social security protection available, we wouldn't have had. Just because we were exploiting this vulnerability and used this migrant labor as these people as if they were not citizens, as if they don't have any rights, we went ahead and exploited them. And suddenly during the COVID, they all felt helpless because they have an uncertain future, no food, no shelter, no wages to pay the rent. So all these are tremendously brings in a kind of a moral and ethical question. How are we governing this thing? So one, at the root where they lived, we have to go and study and see what were the reasons in which there were a lot of push factors for them. Number two, wherever they had come, migrated as a country, India, we have, of course, the right to mobility, right to go and take employment in any part of the world, except few restrictions wherever we have. And if this be so, let there be a freedom of movement, freedom of work, but we need to now bring in the sense of dignity and restoration of the rights. I think that is something we need to now tremendously go and revisit and reformulate our interstate migration policies, interstate labor policies, and I think we have to enhance the social security, which is something very important in this kind of stress and disaster kind of a challenge, that we need to kind of better their access to the basic resources, which are very important. If you have made it very fragile, insecure, that's where this the reverse migration in several millions have exposed our gaps and lacunae in the policy and the protection measures we have.
Thank you, sir.
Professor, may I ask a point from you?
Yes, please.
In the last stages of your lecture, I did notice that you had made a mention of this Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. In this context, I would like to have your thoughts. When you say Vasudhaiva Kudumbam, which means the world is one, in the present scenario, especially with COVID and the pandemic across the world and across the globe, we have seen people returning back to their countries. They were forced to come back to their homes. And we also see that there is an re-emergence of the process of deglobalization, which was earlier talked a few decades ago. So how do you relate that this COVID and Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, don't we see that there is actually a kind of, a separation of people and going back to their homes, and there's this whole, coming back to their own places, which actually has made these borders more important. How do you see this particular thing of deglobalization and Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam in terms of COVID-19, which has brought in separation of people from this multicultural kind of engagement which was earlier present before the arrival of the pandemic? What are your thoughts, sir?
Yes, very sure. Very interesting question. Yes, I think we are definitely living in the age of globalization, where the world post Cold War, the symbolic fall of Berlin Wall, and the disintegration of Soviet Union have all led to a kind of a world where we did not get into a East-West ideological tussle and division, and we have entered a new world era, as we all know, and we are looked at in a very positive way that we are entering a kind of new world order, which is going to be more friendly, more for mobility of people, resources, sharing. That's what we visualize. So on one side, the globalization provides us an opportunity to reimagine and see a world which is of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, a philosophy which is there for several centuries and millennia in India, or Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, as it has been invoked in Tamil. You have this notion which had prevailed several millennia earlier. People have invoked all this, but today we were imagining that we are moving into that. But the paradox is that this globalization is also bringing in nationalism, parochialism, sovereignty. The example is also about the Brexit, for example, within the European Union as a model of integration has shown that how the nation states are trying to become parochial. I think that challenge of a globalized world where there will not be borders and there will be cooperation is on one side. And then today you also tussle. Even during the time of a COVID, when we all are trying to cooperate, understand, and try to bounce back from this crisis, we are also seeing a kind of Indo-China, border issues very much on the forefront. Today, you have two biggest growing nation states are in the confront, which is a very, a further stressful factor that rather than focusing our energy on cooperating with each other and then seeing that how we would come out of this COVID crisis from the very many facets of impact it is, when we are going and trying to almost talk about a line of control and face a severe tension. So I think this multifold challenge will be there. What I'm as an optimist trying to look at is that we have a global world order in a globalized world. There are several opportunities to focus on human rights, human development, social development, and try to do that rather than going into the traditional security arena of trying to confront other nation states and then become aggressive, or trying to bring in border issues, frictions. I think definitely this is a reality. We cannot keep it away. But I see in a way that the world is changing, and India is able to make its presence globally with its progress. I think we need to kind of reformulate in the world where we could focus more on development rather than conflicts. We can focus more on cooperation rather than conflicts. That is something late. That's what I mean, that Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam as a philosophy, which is there to see India, to engage the world. I think we need to go optimistically and do it rather than getting entrapped into the challenges of nationalism, parochialism, and neither able to address our issues internally nor able to participate in the global affairs. I think in this globalized world, but there are elements of uncertainty, challenges, but we need to engage, and I think we need to rise up to the occasion. And I think this is a time where India aspires to be part of the UN Security Council, wants to play a lot of role in the regional and global affairs, I think need to raise it to the occasion. Solving issues like, immediate things with our neighborhood like China or Pakistan. And then, we need to consolidate our growth and development. We need to refocus. And I think that engagement has to go on. So I see that there are definitely challenges as well as opportunity in this context. We need to engage and see this paradox will be there, but doesn't mean we get disillusioned. I think we need to be optimist and move forward, I feel. That's something which we call, from a disaster management perspective, that always there is a, opportunity, a challenge as well as opportunity. Every challenge has its own opportunity. I think we need to bounce back. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. There are several questions in the chat box.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think I'll go and visit there and yeah. So one question I have from Karthikeyan is that, is it possible that universal basic income is applicable in India for migrants during pandemic situation? I think universal basic income is something which is out there, propounded by several agencies like ILO and others. But in India, I think we are not able to come up. Particularly the context of India, we have almost around 90% are working in the informal sector. 93% are in the informal sector, which is something, a huge challenge for us. Very small, minuscule, address the basic income norms. The central state government and some of the international national organizations do. But the informal sector, I think, is a big challenge if 90% of the population are dependent on that. And then agriculture again becomes a huge sector. We are not able to, for a landless agricultural labor, how do we invoke the universal basic income? I think is a very big challenge. But I think the norm has to be taken, and we should ensure that we could give that kind of a thing. Today we are debating again in the last couple of decades on the new form policy, new formers policy and things like that. And there are tremendous opposition coming in that these are not very pro people, and we are trying to control, the governmental control, rather than giving the freedom for the farmers and their minimum support price and things like that. I think we are also entangled in issues of subsidy and other things, which is a commitment which are population which are holding small land in agriculture. We have a lot of landless laborers who are there. So I think this is an interesting idea which we need to bring in, which will be challenging, but I think that should be the striving thing which we all need to do, invoking again our constitution and our basic philosophy of constitution to ensure that we could address the socio-economic needs and bringing the transformation. If this be so, I think this is a very important issue. What is the next question? What is the embarkation and disembarkation, sir? Okay, these embarkation and disembarkation are nothing but wherever the migrant laborers are coming to the cities and towns, we have done that mapping and looked at if they have to embark from that particular city. For example, it is Mumbai. There are several points of embarking. That is starting point, and disembarking is the point where they will go and reach. So we are trying to look at all the travel metrics and look at what are the points where the connectivity can come in for transport, and that's called embarking and disembarking. That's all I think. These are the two questions I'm looking at the box. Yeah. If there are any other questions or comments.
So may I ask you a question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks for your wonderful lecture. So I would like to ask you that is there a possibility that this reverse migration in India, in case of the migrant laborers in India, would bring about a drastic change in the migration pattern for a very long time? And would it prove inimical to the economy, especially the unorganized sector, or can an opportunity be carved out of this?
This reverse migration, has become a kind of a mirror to understand our ongoing socioeconomic tensions. Now, when you say that this many crore people, ranging between 4 to 8, 9 crore people have had the reverse migration or being stranded, and much more people are in the economic, impact and stress due to the COVID lockdown and other measures. I think it's going to take tremendously long time, and then we have a context of 26% of economy being contracted, being that we have gone into a lot of a negative growth. Now, only country in the globe which has survived and claiming that they have a positive growth whatsoever, because of the robustness and their ability to be resilient and overcome, even though that's the source of this very COVID virus. But they contained it in a different manner, and it did not even hit Shanghai or Beijing, but they could bounce back in a different way, and they are claiming only country which claims positive growth. So all other countries are in negative growth, and ours is very alarming with a combination of factors, right from demonetization, GST. Our economy has been contracting, and we have been on the decline. Now, COVID has had a big hit, and economy is in a huge, challenging situation. If this be so, when we juxtapose the migration, look at the kind of impact it has, we have to actually go tremendously to see what kind of economic avenues we will create. What are the kind of relief packages and regeneration livelihood packages we have to see. It will take a long time to really understand the dynamics and do develop new policies. So now two challenges: one, those who have gone back to the respective places, how they are going to settle down and do their economic pursuit. On the other side, if there are avenues to come back, what are the new infrastructures, new ways in which we are going to give them economic opportunities needed as well. I think this is where we are, we have to go a long way to map all this information and develop our policies, ensuring that nobody suffers, nobody is left behind. That's actually a challenge. So we have an economy which is in a huge challenge, and then we need to really facilitate, assist. I think our corporate and industries also have to, raise to the occasion. Always, whenever there are problems, stress, we go to the state, meaning the government, and say that the government is not doing adequately this or that. But I think the point here is about how every stakeholder could come together and raise up to the occasion, and then they could all could collectively do. I think there has to be a lot of work where the government machinery, the corporates, the civil society, the academia have to come in a big way to map all these information which is required to understand the stress and dynamics, and then feed into our new policies and programs which have to go in a long way. Whatever has been suggested so far has been a kind of a macro policy where, to my understanding, not a single rupee is actually transferred. If you looked at the 20 lakh crore, not a single rupee is given by the central government, union government to the state, or the state to any person. It is all a kind of macroeconomic adjustment we are showing. As an incentive, we are giving this many crores to the micro, small, and industries. We are giving this much to the banking sector. All that are shown, and these are supposed to operate and trying to rekindle our economy. But we have to really see how a normal course, an individual labor, would be able to enjoy these benefits and go, I think, a long way to go. But we need, I think it's a very important, very big challenge, but we need to, rework and ensure that we will be able to bring them all on board with a sense of rights and sense of dignity is what I would say. We need to, I think, do that. It's very challenging, of course, given their economic situation. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm seeing one more question coming in the chat box. From Surya, what are the suffering of labor families in the present and the future? Okay, yeah. I think, yeah, we are... My voice is audible? Hello? No. So what is the suffering of migrant labor families? Yes, the migrant labor, we need to map numbers, where they are, how many are migration they are coming, how many are trying to stay back, trying to get back to the cities and other places where they worked. I think these all have been mapped, and the suffering of migrant labor, I think, tremendously, the numbers of, these many million people are suffering. The families definitely suffer because these are all, families, which will have a single breadwinner. And obviously when you had, crisscrossed as a reverse migrant and then, gone back, I think they all are just surviving, without any kind of clarity on how they are going to get back their jobs, how are we going to revive our economy, both the formal sector, the informal sector, which are all having tremendous uncertainties. And then whatever the government does to, revamp, are all, it should be in tune with how we have addressed COVID and also a post-COVID situation where we could, ensure there is a safety, health, another thing on one side, and ensuring that it could actually give them a tremendous scope. I think this COVID pause or COVID lockdown, I would call it, is an occasion where we need to, revisit, rework what are the things which we have provided in terms of wages, in terms of the social protection security, which I referred earlier. I think we need to do that and ensure that it could, take care of the families and their needs. I think this is a tremendous, I would call it a challenge as well as an opportunity to do so. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for taking your time and giving us this wonderful.
Sorry?
Yes, sir. I guess Joseph sir has some question to ask you, sir.
Yeah, just one last one. Sir, it was really eye-opening, and I have just one question. You said that at the outset, people migrate from the rural place to the urban areas for survival. So this reverse, the reverse migration basically defeats the idea because they have nothing there. So it is for the for looking out for some greener pastures that they have moved out to this urban area. At a time of this kind of a crisis, when people opt to move out, apart from the ones that you said, like the needed policy changes, laws that need to be implemented, do you feel that is it not the moral responsibility of state governments to engage proactively and counsel or do counseling services to ameliorate the fear psychosis that's deeply ingrained in these people? Because even if they are to go out, they have nothing back there at their hometowns. So do you think that they should have actively pitched in, and because it's basic sustenance and the maintenance for these kind of people, it's not luxury, so it's basic food and shelter. Do you think just because of political mileage reasons that that the state governments have missed out on this point, or do you think that they should have risen to the occasion and should have defended their moral responsibilities? Thank you, sir.
The last point I think is very important, and we have this rural to urban migration is all about of the push factors, meaning that you have the local economic avenues are not there, therefore the move on. Now the reverse migration happens only for the families they've gone back, not for securing their economy. I think, as rightly said, that the state governments have to now, I think, map all these population which have come back to their states and develop the new programs to accommodate them. And if at all they have to go back to the respective, as I said earlier, we need to provide those new facilities and ensuring that they will. So I think that is something we need to work at national level and state level to address these, I think, stressful reverse migration. So I think that's a very valid point said. And I would like to thank all of you for your wonderful questions and engagement. It's also very enriching to come back. And this, I'm also getting certain fresh thoughts on which we could input and, so thank you once again from my side, the Department of Political Science, for providing this wonderful opportunity in action here, and over to you all, organizing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking your time in giving us this wonderful lecture despite the pandemic and answering all our questions patiently. Now, I would like to call upon Varsha from 3rd BA to propose the vote of thanks.
A very good afternoon to one and all. First and foremost, I thank God Almighty for making today's program a great success. On behalf of the Association of Political Science, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. K.M. Parivelan for sharing his insights on COVID-19 and its impact on forced migration. My heartfelt thanks to our dear faculty and fellow students of the department. Thank you.